They say a surgeon's hands are insured for millions. But what is the price of a man's soul? I'm watching a boardroom at Meridian City Medical Center. Mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city where some of the finest surgeons in the country practice their craft. And where one surgeon is about to lose absolutely everything. Dr. Marcus Vance sits at the head of that table, 52 years old, chief of surgery, one of the most celebrated thoracic surgeons on the East Coast. His hands are steady, his reputation is sterling, his ego is astronomical. He's mid-sentence, something about quarterly performance metrics, when the door opens and a man walks in. The man is thin, wearing a tailored suit that suggests success. His face is calm, patient, but when he speaks, his voice is wrong, raspy, damaged, the sound of broken glass wrapped in sandpaper. "Hello, Dr. Vance," the man says. "My name is Elias Grant. You probably don't remember me." Dr. Vance's face goes pale, because he does remember. "You took my voice, doctor," Elias continues, that ruined voice filling the silent boardroom. "So now I'm taking your podium." The old saying goes, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. Dr. Vance's lie traveled fast. 5 years it ran unchallenged. But the truth? The truth was patient. The ledger always balances, always. The silence lasted 5 years, but the echo lasts forever. But to understand this moment, to truly appreciate the look of dawning horror on Dr. Vance's face, we need to go back to the beginning, back to when Elias Grant had one of the most beautiful voices in the world, and back to when Dr. Marcus Vance decided that his schedule was more important than a patient's life. If you want to see an arrogant surgeon lose everything, subscribe now. 5 years earlier, Elias Grant was standing on the stage of the Meridian Opera House. The lights were golden, warm, the kind of lighting that transforms everything it touches into something magical. And Elias didn't need the transformation. He was already magic. He was 38 years old, 6 feet tall, with the lean build of a man who spent his life learning control. Control over breath, over posture, over every muscle involved in producing sound. His voice was a tenor, not just any tenor, the kind that music critics ran out of adjectives describing. Transcendent, they wrote, otherworldly, a voice that reminds us why opera exists. That night, he was closing the second act of Tosca, the aria E lucevan le stelle, one of the most emotionally devastating pieces in the repertoire. The audience was silent, 2,000 people holding their collective breath. Elias sang the final phrase, his voice soaring through the opera house like something with wings. The last note hung in the air, perfect. Then the applause started. Not polite applause, not the kind of response you give because tradition demands it. A standing ovation, thunderous. People were crying, some were screaming his name. Elias took his bow, felt the warmth of the stage lights on his face, felt the love of 2,000 strangers washing over him like a wave. This was his life, his purpose, the thing he'd been working towards since he was 8 years old and realized that singing was the only language that truly made sense. He was at the peak of his career. He had no idea that it was all about to end. 3 weeks after that performance, Elias noticed a problem. Nothing major, just a slight hoarseness in the morning, a scratchiness that usually cleared up after his warm-ups, but it wasn't clearing up. He saw his regular throat specialist, Dr. Patricia Chen, a woman who'd been monitoring his vocal cords for years. She did a scope, examined high-resolution images of his larynx, frowned slightly. "You have a small polyp on your left vocal cord," she said. "It's benign, very common in singers, but it needs to come off before it gets bigger." Elias felt his stomach tighten. How invasive is the procedure? "Minimally," Dr. Chen assured him. "We go in through your mouth, use micro-instruments. You'll be under general anesthesia. The whole thing takes about 30 minutes. And my voice? Should be completely fine. You'll need vocal rest for 2 weeks, no speaking at all, then gradual rehabilitation. Most singers are back to full capacity within 6 weeks." She smiled. "I've done this procedure hundreds of times, Elias, but I'm booked solid for the next 3 months. I can refer you to a colleague at Meridian City Medical Center." "Is he good?" "He's excellent. Dr. Marcus Vance, chief of surgery. He trained under the same program I did." Elias nodded. What choice did he have? The polyp wouldn't wait 3 months. Dr. Chen made the call, scheduled the surgery for the following week. Elias hung up the phone and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Elias met Dr. Marcus Vance for exactly 7 minutes before the surgery. 7 minutes that told him everything he needed to know and nothing he wanted to hear. Dr. Vance walked into the pre-op consultation room like a man late for something more important. He was in his late 40s, graying hair, expensive suit, the kind of watch that cost more than most people's cars. He didn't make eye contact when he shook Elias's hand. "Mr. Grant," he said, flipping through a tablet. "Vocal polyp, left cord, straightforward procedure. Patricia told me about your profession." The pause before profession was deliberate, dismissive. "Yes," Elias said carefully. "My voice is my livelihood. Dr. Chen assured me that—" "You'll be fine," Dr. Vance interrupted. "I've done thousands of these. It's a simple excision, in and out." He glanced at his watch. The gesture was small but unmistakable. He had somewhere else to be. "Do you have any questions?" Dr. Vance asked, already standing. Elias had a dozen questions, about recovery timelines, about the specific techniques Dr. Vance would use, about what precautions would be taken to protect the surrounding tissue. But Dr. Vance's body language made it clear that questions were an inconvenience. "No," Elias said quietly. "I trust you." Dr. Vance smiled, the smile of a man who heard that phrase so often it had lost all meaning. "See you in the OR," he said, and walked out. The entire consultation had taken 7 minutes. Elias sat alone in the pre-op room and felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Something was wrong. But the surgery was scheduled. The polyp was growing. His next performance was in 8 weeks. He had no choice. Or so he thought. The surgery was scheduled for 3 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. Dr. Vance arrived at the hospital that morning, already running behind. 2 emergency surgeries had pushed his schedule back by 90 minutes. He was supposed to leave at 5 p.m. for a medical conference in Boston, a conference where he was the keynote speaker. A conference he absolutely could not miss. His assistant had already rebooked his flight twice. There was no more flexibility. If he didn't leave by 5:30 p.m., he'd miss the dinner where he was being honored. Which meant the 3 p.m. vocal polyp removal had to be fast. Very fast. Elias was wheeled into the operating room at 3:15 p.m. The anesthesiologist, a kind older man named Dr. Patel, held Elias's hand while the sedation took effect. "Count backward from 10, Dr. Patel said softly. 10, 9, 8. Elias's world went dark. What happened next, Elias would never remember. But 3 people in that operating room would remember it for the rest of their lives. Dr. Vance was rushing. Not dangerously fast, not the kind of recklessness that would alarm his surgical team, but fast enough that his movements had a sharp, impatient quality. Fast enough that he wasn't checking his work as carefully as he should have been. The polyp was exactly where Dr. Chen had described it, a small growth on the left vocal cord, easily accessible with microforceps. Dr. Vance positioned the instruments, clamped the polyp, began the excision. But his hand slipped, just half a millimeter. The microscalpel nicked the vocal cord itself, not the polyp, the healthy tissue surrounding it. It was a small cut, a tiny injury that would have been invisible to the naked eye. But vocal cords are delicate, precision instruments. The difference between a perfect note and silence can be measured in micrometers. Dr. Vance saw it immediately, saw the nick, saw the slight bleeding that indicated damage beyond the polyp. He glanced at the clock. 3:47 p.m. If you reported the complication now, he'd need to spend time repairing it. Meticulous work, possibly another 30 minutes. He'd miss his flight, miss the conference, miss the award ceremony where they were going to call him one of the finest thoracic surgeons of his generation. Dr. Vance made a decision. He finished removing the polyp. He did not repair the damage to the vocal cord, and then he dictated his surgical notes with one crucial lie. Polyp successfully excised, no complications. Patient to follow standard post-op protocol. The surgical nurse, a woman named Claire Morrison, who'd been working at Meridian Medical for 12 years, watched this happen from her position by the instrument tray. She saw the slip. She saw Dr. Vance glance at the clock. She saw him make the decision not to fix it. And she said nothing. Because Dr. Marcus Vance was chief of surgery, because questioning him would mean questioning the most powerful doctor in the hospital, because she had 2 kids at home and student loans and a career she couldn't afford to jeopardize. She said nothing. And Elias Grant, still unconscious on the operating table, had no idea that his voice, his career, his identity, his entire life, had just been sacrificed for a keynote speech and a trophy. Elias woke up in recovery at 5:30 p.m. His throat hurt. That was expected. Dr. Chen had warned him there would be discomfort. But something felt wrong. A nurse checked his vitals, smiled reassuringly. Everything went perfectly. Dr. Vance said it was textbook. Elias tried to speak. Nothing came out. The nurse saw his panic and touched his arm. "That's normal. You're under strict vocal rest orders. No speaking at all for 2 weeks, remember?" Elias nodded, tried to calm his racing heart. It was normal, expected. Dr. Chen had explained this. The fear was just the anesthesia wearing off. He was fine. Everything was fine. It wasn't fine. 2 weeks later, Elias tried to speak for the first time. He was sitting in his apartment in Meridian City, early morning, coffee cooling on the kitchen counter. 2 weeks of silence, 2 weeks of communicating through notes and gestures and text messages. His throat felt healed. The pain was gone. The swelling had subsided. Dr. Vance had cleared him to begin speaking again. "Start gently," the follow-up notes had said. "Whispers only for the first few days." Elias took a breath, opened his mouth, tried to say, "Hello." What came out was a rasp, not a whisper, a rasp, like gravel scraping over broken glass, like the sound a dying animal might make. Elias tried again. "Hello, hello, hello." Each attempt sounded worse than the last. His voice, the instrument he'd spent 30 years perfecting, was gone. Panic exploded in his chest like a bomb. If Dr. Vance's lie makes you sick, hit the like button. Stay with me. This story is just beginning. Elias went back to Dr. Vance the next day. He practically ran into the office, handed the receptionist a note because his voice was too destroyed to speak clearly. "Emergency. Need to see Dr. Vance immediately." The receptionist made him wait 90 minutes. 90 minutes sitting in the waiting room, throat burning, future collapsing. When Dr. Vance finally called him in, the surgeon's face showed mild irritation rather than concern. "Mr. Grant, I thought we'd resolved everything at your follow-up." Elias tried to speak. That horrible rasp filled the office. "My voice," he managed to say. Each word hurt. "It's wrong. Something's wrong." Dr. Vance sat back in his chair. "Have you been resting your voice like I instructed?" "Yes. 2 weeks. Complete silence." Dr. Vance pulled up Elias's chart, scrolled through it with an expression that looked almost bored. The surgery was successful. The polyp was completely removed. There were no complications. "Then why?" Elias's voice cracked. "Why do I sound like this?" Dr. Vance leaned forward. His expression was sympathetic in the way that doctors learn to manufacture. "Mr. Grant, I have to ask, did you speak at all during your recovery period?" "No." "Not even whispers?" "No. I followed your instructions exactly." Dr. Vance made a note on his tablet. "I see. And you're certain, because sometimes patients don't realize they're using their voice. Clearing their throat, coughing forcefully, even humming can cause damage during the healing process." Elias stared at him. "I didn't use my voice." "The problem, Mr. Grant, is that vocal cord surgery is very delicate." Dr. Vance's tone was patient now, educational. If a patient doesn't follow post-op protocols precisely, if they speak too soon or strain their voice in any way, the healing can be compromised. "I speak," Elias said, his ruined voice rising. "I followed every instruction." Dr. Vance stood up. "I can refer you to a speech therapist. That's really the best option at this point. Give your cords more time to heal." "You're saying this is my fault?" Elias could barely get the words out. "I'm saying that complications from vocal cord surgery are almost always related to patient non-compliance with recovery protocols." Dr. Vance opened the office door, the universal signal that the appointment was over. "I performed the procedure perfectly, Mr. Grant. What happened after you left the hospital isn't something I can control." Elias walked out of that office with his world in pieces. The message was clear. Whatever was wrong with his voice, Dr. Marcus Vance had decided it was Elias's fault, and there was nothing Elias could do about it. The next 3 months were a slow-motion nightmare. Elias saw 6 different throat specialists. All of them scoped his vocal cords with high-resolution cameras. All of them studied the images with frowns that deepened with each viewing. And all of them saw the same thing. Scar tissue on his left vocal cord. exactly where the polyp had been removed, dense, irregular, the kind of scarring that suggested trauma beyond what a simple excision should cause. "It's unusual," one doctor said, a laryngologist at Columbia Medical with 30 years of experience. "Normally, with a straightforward polyp excision, we don't see this kind of scarring. It looks almost like surgical trauma." She caught herself, chose her words carefully. "Can it be fixed?" Elias's rasp was getting worse. Some days he could barely speak above a whisper. Other days, his voice cracked mid-sentence like ice breaking. "Possibly," the doctor said carefully. "But surgery on scar tissue is complicated. Vocal cords are delicate. The tissue is only millimeters thick. Operating on already damaged tissue risks making it worse." She closed the file. "I'm sorry, Mr. Grant, but if I were you, I'd learn to work with the voice you have now." Elias tried speech therapy. Twice-a-week sessions with a vocal rehabilitation specialist who taught him breathing exercises and resonance techniques. He tried steroids, anti-inflammatory medications that were supposed to reduce the scar tissue. He tried vocal exercises, humming scales, gentle phonation drills. Nothing worked. His voice, the instrument that had defined his entire life, remained broken. And then, the opera company canceled his contract. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. "Dear Elias, we are so sorry, but without your voice at full capacity, we cannot fulfill the commitments we've made to our season ticket holders. We understand this is devastating, and we wish you the very best in your recovery." Professional, polite, final. 30 years of work erased in 3 paragraphs. His agent stopped returning calls. Performance offers dried up. Audition invitations disappeared. For 30 years, Elias Grant had been defined by his voice. Now he was defined by its absence. The media noticed. Former opera star's career ends in mysterious vocal injury. Grant blames surgery, doctors say patient non-compliance. That last headline was the worst. Dr. Vance had given an interview to the Meridian City Journal. "Mr. Grant's surgery was successful," the surgeon said on record, his professional concern perfectly calibrated. "Unfortunately, patients sometimes don't follow post-operative instructions as carefully as they should. Vocal rest is critical after this type of procedure, and even small violations can have lasting consequences." It was a masterclass in misdirection. Dr. Vance never explicitly said Elias had done anything wrong. He just strongly implied it. And the world believed him. Because why wouldn't they? He was Dr. Marcus Vance, chief of surgery, published researcher, award-winning surgeon with a spotless record. And Elias? Elias was just a singer who couldn't sing anymore. A patient who'd probably been reckless with his recovery and was now looking for someone to blame. The comments sections under the articles were brutal, always the patient's fault. They never listen. Opera singers are so dramatic. Probably used his voice and won't admit it. Dr. Vance is one of the best surgeons in the country. This guy is just looking for a payout. Elias stopped reading after the first dozen, stopped checking his email, stopped answering the phone. He watched his savings account dwindle. Medical bills piled up, scopes, consultations, therapies, medications. His apartment rent came due, utilities, basic existence. All of it costing money he wasn't earning anymore. Elias is down, but not out. Turn on notifications to see his comeback. This is about to get... Depression came like a wave and pulled Elias under. Not all at once. That's not how depression works. It came in stages: denial, anger, bargaining, and finally a crushing despair that made getting out of bed feel impossible. Some days he couldn't get out of bed. He'd lie there, staring at the ceiling of his Meridian City apartment, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Car horns, sirens, people going about their lives while his had ground to a halt. Other days, he'd force himself up, make coffee, sit on his balcony, try to read or watch something, pretend he was still a functional human being. But always, he'd end up in front of the mirror, trying to speak, trying to coax something, anything resembling his old voice from his damaged throat. "Hello?" The rasp scraped out of him like glass on concrete. "My name is Elias Grant." Worse, each word hurt. "I am a singer." Was past tense. The mirror showed him a man he didn't recognize anymore. Thinner, older, eyes that had lost their light. 6 months after the surgery, Elias found himself thinking about giving up entirely. Not just on singing, on everything. The thoughts came late at night when sleep wouldn't come, when the silence of the apartment felt like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. What was the point? His career was over, his identity was gone. He was 38 years old with no skills except singing, and he couldn't sing anymore. He had no future. He was sitting on his balcony at 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, staring at the lights of Meridian City spread out below him when his phone buzzed. A message from his older brother David. They hadn't been close. David was 5 years older, had left home when Elias was still a teenager, chasing dreams in Los Angeles, while Elias chased his in New York and eventually Meridian City. Different paths, different worlds, but still brothers. "Saw your interview got picked up by CBS. Brutal. Wanna talk?" Elias stared at the message. David was an audio engineer in Los Angeles. He worked on films, TV shows, commercials, the technical side of sound that Elias had never paid much attention to. What could they possibly talk about? He typed back. "Not much to say. Career's over. Voice is gone. Vance won." The response came quickly. David must have been waiting. "Your voice isn't gone. It's just different. Come to LA. Let me show you something." Elias almost said no. Almost texted back that he didn't need pity or false hope or whatever David was offering. But the alternative was staying in Meridian City, drowning in depression and debt, waiting for the money to run out and the eviction notice to arrive. At least Los Angeles would be a different place to be miserable. At least he'd be around family. 2 weeks later, he was on a plane to Los Angeles. 1 suitcase, 1 carry-on. Everything else left behind or sold to cover rent he couldn't afford anymore. He had no idea that his ruined voice was about to become his greatest asset. Had no idea that the worst thing that ever happened to him would eventually become the best. Sometimes the ledger works in ways you can't see coming. David Grant's studio was in Burbank, a converted warehouse in an industrial area that looked nothing like the Hollywood glamour Elias had imagined. Concrete floors, exposed pipes, soundproofing foam covering the walls like strange geometric art, and enough technology to make NASA jealous. Mixing boards with hundreds of channels, digital audio workstations with screens showing waveforms and spectrums, racks of processors and compressors, and equipment Elias couldn't begin to identify. When Elias walked in, David hugged him hard. The kind of hug that said more than words could. "You sound like hell," David said, stepping back. "Thanks," Elias rasped sarcastically. "No, I mean it literally," David grinned. "Your voice sounds like something from a horror movie. It's perfect." Elias blinked. "Perfect for what? Scaring children?" "Voice acting," David said immediately. "Audiobook narration, character work. Dude, do you have any idea how much money people pay for a unique voice?" "I can barely speak." Elias's rasp made every word hurt, a constant reminder of what he'd lost. "You can speak fine," David walked over to one of the mixing boards. "You just can't sing. But speaking, that's a completely different game. Different muscles, different techniques, different markets." He pulled up a chair. "Sit, let me show you something." He loaded a project on his computer, clicked play. A voice came through the speakers. Deep, gravelly, distinctive. The kind of voice that commanded attention immediately. It narrated a movie trailer, something dark and atmospheric. "That's a villain character for an animated series," David explained. "The actor makes $15,000 per episode, 20 episodes per season." He looked at Elias. "Your voice, your damaged, raspy, broken voice, is than his. More unique, more interesting, more memorable." Elias sat very still. For 6 months, all he'd heard was how his voice was ruined, destroyed, a liability he'd have to live with forever. And now David was saying it was an asset, a valuable one. "I don't know anything about voice acting," Elias said quietly. "You know everything about voice control, breath support, diction, emotional delivery." David leaned forward. "You spent 30 years becoming one of the best singers in the world. Those skills don't disappear just because your vocal cords have scar tissue." But nothing. You think opera is hard? Try delivering a believable performance while staring at a microphone in a soundproof booth with no audience, no costumes, no sets. David smiled. "It's hard, and you're already better equipped for it than 99% of people who try." For the first time in 6 months, something flickered in Elias's chest. Not quite hope, not yet. But close, very close. Elias spent 3 months in Los Angeles learning the technical side of audio work. David taught him everything: sound engineering, digital audio workstations, mixing, mastering, vocal processing. How to take raw sound and sculpt it into something perfect. "If you can't perform anymore, you can produce," David said. And Elias discovered something surprising. He loved it. Loved the control, loved the precision, loved how you could take imperfect audio and make it flawless through understanding and technique. More than that, he was good at it. Incredibly good. The same ear that had made him a great opera singer made him exceptional at audio engineering. He could hear subtleties in sound that most people couldn't even perceive, frequencies that were off by fractions of a hertz, harmonics that clashed, timing that was microseconds too late. His first client was a small true crime podcast that needed sound design. They paid him $200. Elias spent 40 hours on a 20-minute episode, obsessing over every detail, every transition, every moment where music swelled or dialogue needed enhancement. The podcast downloads tripled after that episode aired. Word spread. Within 6 months, Elias had worked on 20 podcasts: crime stories, business interviews, narrative fiction, each one better than the last. Within a year, he'd founded his own company, Vox Systems. The name was deliberate. Vox, Latin for voice, the thing that had been taken from him, the thing he was learning to reclaim in a completely different way. Vox Systems started small. Audio production for podcasts and audiobooks, voice processing software, sound design for commercials. But it grew fast, because Elias Grant brought the same obsessive perfectionism to audio engineering that he'd brought to opera. By year 2, Vox Systems had 15 employees working out of a proper office in Los Angeles. They'd developed a proprietary algorithm for removing background noise from audio recordings, something that had never been done successfully before. The algorithm became an industry standard overnight. Podcasters loved it, voice actors loved it, film studios started licensing it. By year 3, Vox Systems had 40 employees and $8 million in revenue. They'd expanded into voice enhancement software for accessibility, helping people with speech impediments communicate more clearly. Elias's ruined voice became the company's greatest marketing tool. He'd do interviews where his rasp was impossible to ignore, where journalists would ask about it, and he'd tell them the truth. A surgical mistake, a surgeon who lied, a voice destroyed by medical negligence. Then he'd demonstrate Vox Systems technology, how it could take even his damaged voice and make it sound clear and strong. "If it works for me," he'd say in that unforgettable rasp, "it works for anyone." The company exploded. By year 4, they had 200 employees and $300 million in revenue. By year 5, Vox Systems was worth $200 million. And Elias Grant, the opera singer who'd lost his voice, was one of the most successful audio technology entrepreneurs in the country. But success wasn't enough, because every time Elias spoke, his ruined voice reminded him of Dr. Marcus Vance. Every single day. And the ledger was still keeping score. 3 years into building Vox Systems, Elias hired a private investigator. Her name was Rachel Torres, former FBI, now running her own firm specializing in medical malpractice investigations. Expensive, discreet, ruthless. "I need to know everything about Dr. Marcus Vance," Elias told her, his rasp filling her office. His surgical history, his financial situation, his patterns, his mistakes. Rachel didn't ask why. She just took the $50,000 retainer and got to work. 2 months later, she came back with a file 3 inches thick and one name that changed everything. Claire Morrison, surgical nurse, Meridian City Medical Center. The woman who'd been in the operating room the day Elias's voice was destroyed. Rachel had found her working at a small clinic in Newark, New Jersey. She'd left Meridian Medical 2 years after Elias's surgery, quietly, without fanfare, burned out, disillusioned, carrying a secret she'd never told anyone. "She saw something," Rachel said, tapping the file. "I don't know what, but she left a hospital where she'd worked for 12 years right after Dr. Vance got promoted to chief of surgery. Can you get her to talk?" Elias's rasp was barely a whisper. "I can try," Rachel said, "but if she's been silent this long, she's scared of something, or someone." Elias flew to Newark the next week, met Claire at a coffee shop 3 blocks from her apartment, a quiet place where nobody would recognize either of them. She recognized him immediately when he walked in. Her face went pale. Her hands started shaking around her coffee cup. "Mr. Grant," she said quietly, I wondered if you'd ever find me." They talked for 3 hours. Claire told him everything. How Dr. Vance had been rushing that day. How he had a conference in Boston. How he'd been checking the clock every few minutes during the surgery. How his hand had slipped. How she'd seen the scalpel nick Elias's vocal cord, the healthy tissue, not the polyp. How Dr. Vance had seen it too. Had paused, had glanced at the clock one more time, and had chosen not to fix it. Had chosen to finish the procedure quickly and get to his flight. "He lied in the surgical notes," Claire said, crying now. "Said there were no complications. But I saw it happen. I saw him damage your vocal cord and decide it wasn't worth the time to repair. Why didn't you say anything?" Elias's rasp was gentle, not accusatory. "Because he's the chief of surgery," Claire whispered. "Because I had 2 kids at home and student loans and a career I couldn't afford to lose. Because I was terrified that if I spoke up, he'd destroy me the way he destroyed you." She wiped her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I should have said something. I should have—" "I need you to testify," Elias interrupted gently. "I need you to go on record, to tell the truth about what happened in that operating room." Claire looked at him with terrified eyes. "He'll destroy me. You know he will." "He already destroyed me," Elias said, his rasp cutting through the coffee shop noise. "My voice, my career, my entire identity. He took it all and then blamed me for it." He leaned forward. "Help me make sure he can't do it to anyone else." Claire stared at her coffee for a long time. The silence stretched. Then she looked up, nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it. I'll tell the truth." And the ledger moved one step closer to balance. It took another year to put all the pieces in place. Elias didn't just want to sue Dr. Vance. Lawsuits were long, messy, uncertain. They could drag on for years. And even if he won, Dr. Vance would keep his medical license, keep his position, keep destroying people. Elias wanted something permanent. Meridian City Medical Center was struggling financially. Hospital mergers and insurance reimbursement changes had hit them hard. Their operating margins were razor thin. They were exploring strategic partnerships. Corporate code for, "We're in trouble and we're looking for a buyer." Vox Systems made an offer to acquire them. Not directly, that would have been too obvious. Through a holding company with a different name. Clean, untraceable. The acquisition proposal was generous. All cash, above market value. Exactly what a desperate hospital board wanted to see. They looked at Vox Systems' financials, saw a profitable, growing technology company with deep pockets, saw salvation. They accepted. The deal was announced in June. Dr. Marcus Vance barely paid attention to who was buying the hospital. He was too busy with his surgical schedule, his conference appearances, his award ceremonies, his ego. He assumed it was some private equity firm, some faceless corporation that would fire administrators but leave the doctors alone. He didn't recognize the name on the acquisition documents. didn't know who founded Vox Systems, didn't realize that the signature approving the $220 million purchase belonged to a man whose voice he'd destroyed 5 years earlier, a man he'd blamed for his own mistake, a man he hadn't thought about in years. Until Elias walked into that boardroom. The first post-acquisition meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Monday. Dr. Vance arrived 15 minutes early. Old habits. He wanted to be seated before the new ownership arrived, wanted to project calm authority even though the acquisition made him uneasy. Change always made him uneasy. The boardroom was the same one where he'd presented countless surgical reports. The same mahogany table, the same leather chairs, windows overlooking Meridian City. He chose a seat near the middle, not too presumptuous but not relegated to the edges either. Other staff filed in, hospital administrators, the remaining board members, everyone waiting to meet the new boss. The door opened at exactly 10 a.m., and Elias Grant walked in. For a moment, Dr. Vance didn't recognize him. 5 years changes people. Elias was leaner now, wore an expensive suit that spoke of success. Then Elias spoke, and that voice, that impossible, ruined, unforgettable rasp, filled the room. "Hello, Dr. Vance. My name is Elias Grant. You probably don't remember me." The boardroom was silent. 8 people around the table, hospital administrators, board members, lawyers, all staring. Dr. Vance's face had gone from confident to confused to absolutely pale, because he did remember. Every detail. The surgery, the slip, the decision, the lies. "You took my voice, doctor," Elias said, his rasp filling the room. "So now I'm taking your podium." What is this?" Dr. Vance stammered. "I don't understand. This is a board meeting for the new ownership," Elias interrupted calmly, taking his seat at the head of the table. "I own this hospital now, which means I own your contract, your position, your future." He placed a folder on the table, slid it toward Dr. Vance with deliberate precision. "This is an affidavit from Claire Morrison, surgical nurse. She was in the OR 5 years ago when you removed my vocal polyp." Dr. Vance's hands were shaking, visibly trembling against the polished wood. "I don't know what you're talking about." His voice had none of its usual authority. "She saw you slip," Elias continued, his damaged voice somehow more powerful than any aria he'd ever sung. "Saw the scalpel nick my vocal cord, the healthy tissue, not the polyp. Saw you check your watch and decide that repairing the damage would make you late for your conference in Boston." One of the board members gasped softly. The pieces were coming together. "That's insane," Dr. Vance said, but his voice cracked. "The surgery was successful. Your vocal issues were from patient non-compliance." "From you," Elias interrupted, his rasp cutting like a blade. "She saw you damage my vocal cord and choose not to fix it. Saw you lie in the surgical notes." He opened the folder slowly, pulled out document after document. "We have testimony from the anesthesiologist who thought it was strange how quickly you finished," Elias said. "From the surgical tech who noticed you were unusually agitated. From hospital records showing you left for Boston exactly 90 minutes after my surgery ended." He placed another document on the table. "This is the original OR schedule. You were running 90 minutes late that day. Your keynote speech in Boston was at 7 p.m. You couldn't miss it. They were giving you an award." Dr. Vance's face had gone from pale to ash gray. How did you get— I bought the hospital, Elias said simply, which means I have access to everything. Every record, every file, every piece of evidence you thought was safely buried. He stood up, walked around the table with measured steps. Every eye in the room followed him, some with dawning understanding, some with horror. You destroyed my voice to make a dinner reception, Elias said, his rasp filling every corner of the boardroom. You blamed me for your mistake, gave interviews saying I was non-compliant, made me unemployable. He stopped beside Dr. Vance's chair, looked down at the man who'd stolen everything from him. And then you went on with your life like I'd never existed. Dr. Vance's mouth opened. No sound came out. Elias placed a single sheet of paper on the table in front of him. This is your resignation letter, effective immediately. I won't, Dr. Vance started, or I go to the medical board with all of this. Elias's voice was calm, almost gentle, which made it more terrifying. And to the media, and to every patient you've operated on in the last decade who might wonder if you were rushing through their surgery too. The silence was absolute. Dr. Vance looked around the table, seeking support, finding none. Because they'd all just heard the truth. Because the evidence was irrefutable. You can resign quietly, Elias said, his voice still measured. Or I can make sure your name becomes synonymous with medical malpractice for the next 20 years. Your choice, doctor. The rasp made the word sound like an accusation. Dr. Marcus Vance, chief of surgery, award-winning thoracic surgeon, man who'd valued a trophy more than a patient's voice, picked up the pen with shaking hands and signed his resignation. The room remained silent as he stood, as he walked to the door on unsteady legs, as his career, built on brilliance and destroyed by arrogance, ended with the click of a closing door. And Elias Grant, speaking in the voice that Dr. Vance had given him, watched the ledger finally balance. Drop in the chat for that firing scene. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Dr. Vance didn't just resign. He tried to fight back, hired lawyers, threatened countersuits, attempted to frame Elias's acquisition as a vendetta, but the evidence was irrefutable. Within 24 hours of the boardroom confrontation, his name was scrubbed from Meridian City Medical Center's website. His plaques came down from the walls. His office was cleared and reassigned. It was as if Dr. Marcus Vance had never existed. Within a week, the medical board formally announced an investigation. Claire Morrison's affidavit was submitted as evidence. The OR recordings. The timeline proving Dr. Vance had prioritized a conference over patient safety. The hospital's legal team, now working for Elias, cooperated fully. Every file, every record, every piece of documentation that Dr. Vance thought would stay buried forever. Within 3 months, the medical board suspended Dr. Vance's license pending the investigation's outcome. Within 6 months, that suspension became permanent revocation. Dr. Marcus Vance, chief of surgery, published researcher, award-winning thoracic surgeon, would never practice medicine again. The hands he'd insured for millions were now worthless in his profession. The media coverage was relentless. Disgraced surgeon loses license after patient cover-up. From opera stage to boardroom, how one man's voice destroyed a surgeon's career. The doctor who chose an award over a patient and lost everything. Every outlet wanted the story. Every network requested interviews. The dramatic arc was perfect for headlines. Opera singer loses voice, builds tech empire, buys hospital, exposes surgeon. It went viral within 48 hours, 10 million views in the first week. But Elias gave exactly one interview to a national morning show. The camera focused on his face as he spoke in that unforgettable rasp, the voice that had become his trademark, his weapon, his proof. "I didn't do this for revenge," he said quietly. "I did it because Dr. Vance's arrogance put patient safety second, and I wanted to make sure he could never do that to anyone else." The interviewer pressed, "But you must feel some satisfaction, some sense of justice?" Elias paused. "I feel relief. 5 years ago, Dr. Vance destroyed my voice and then convinced the world it was my fault. For 5 years I carried that, the shame, the doubt, the wondering if maybe I had somehow caused it." His raspy voice grew stronger. "Now the truth is out, the ledger is balanced, and most importantly, Dr. Vance can't rush through another surgery to make a dinner reservation." That clip went even more viral. 20 million views, shared across every platform. And then, other patients started coming forward. People who'd had procedures performed by Dr. Vance over the years. A woman named Victoria Chen, who'd needed revision surgery on her vocal cords a year after Dr. Vance's initial procedure. She'd been told the complications were just part of healing. A man named Robert Pierce, whose thoracic surgery had taken twice as long to recover from as predicted. Dr. Vance had blamed his lifestyle choices. A teenager named Emma Rodriguez, whose parents had been told the unusual scarring from her procedure was normal for her body type. All of them now wondering if Dr. Vance had been rushing through their surgeries too. 8 former patients filed formal complaints with the medical board. 6 of them settled out of court with Dr. Vance's malpractice insurance. 2 went to trial. Dr. Vance lost both trials. The verdicts were unanimous. His professional reputation wasn't just damaged, it was obliterated. Every Google search of his name brought up the scandal. Every medical database showed his revoked license. Every colleague knew what he'd done. He tried to rebuild, applied for consulting positions at smaller hospitals in other states. But the internet never forgets, and neither does the ledger. Every potential employer ran a background check. Every interview ended the same way, a polite rejection email citing cultural fit concerns. The last anyone heard, Dr. Marcus Vance was working for an insurance company, reviewing claims from behind a desk, making a fraction of his former salary, never touching a patient again, never stepping into an OR, never feeling the weight of a scalpel in his hand or the authority of a surgeon's white coat. His arrogance had cost him everything, and he had no one to blame but himself. Meanwhile, Elias Grant's company continued to grow. Vox Systems expanded into new markets, voice accessibility tools, hearing aid technology, AI-powered speech rehabilitation. 3 years after the confrontation, the company was valued at $500 million. 5 years after, it had gone public with a market cap of $1.2 billion. Elias's damaged voice, the voice that Dr. Vance had given him, became a symbol, not of tragedy, not of victimhood, but of resilience, of transformation, of turning your worst moment into your defining strength. He never got his singing voice back. That was gone forever, destroyed on an operating table by a surgeon who valued a trophy more than a person. But he found something else, a different kind of power, a different way to make the world listen. The ledger had balanced, entry recorded, debt collected. Another story for the archives. Here's what I've learned from Elias's story. First, arrogance is the surgeon's deadliest instrument. Dr. Vance was talented, skilled, experienced. He'd performed thousands of successful procedures and saved countless lives. But his arrogance made him careless, made him believe that his schedule, his awards, his reputation were more important than the patient on his table. That 7-minute consultation wasn't efficiency, it was contempt. That glance at his watch during surgery wasn't time management, it was priority inversion. That decision to leave damage unrepaired wasn't a judgment call, it was ego choosing self-preservation over a patient's future. His arrogance cost him everything: his license, his reputation, his career, his legacy. The moment you believe you're above the consequences of your actions is the moment you become most vulnerable to them. Arrogance blinds you to your mistakes, makes you sloppy, makes you think the rules don't apply. And mistakes? Mistakes have a way of coming back, always. Second, your voice is more than just sound, it's your power. Elias lost his singing voice. That was devastating. That was the death of one identity, one dream, 30 years of dedication erased in a single surgical error. But his power didn't come from the specific sound he could make. It came from who he was: the discipline, the perfectionism, the ear for subtle details, the ability to control breath and emotion and delivery. Those skills didn't disappear when his vocal cords scarred, they just needed a different outlet. He found a different kind of voice, a voice in audio technology, a voice in entrepreneurship, a voice in seeking justice, not just for himself, but for every future patient who might suffer under Dr. Vance's rushed care. The raspy voice that Dr. Vance gave him became more powerful than his singing voice ever was. Because that rasp told a story, commanded attention, couldn't be ignored or dismissed. Your voice is whatever makes you uniquely you. Your skills, your perspective, your contribution to the world. When someone tries to take that from you, you have two choices: give up or find a new way to speak. Elias chose to roar, and the world listened. Third, the truth is patient. For 5 years, Dr. Vance's lie went unchallenged. He built his reputation higher, won more awards, gave more keynote speeches. He convinced the world that Elias's ruined voice was Elias's own fault. Patient non-compliance, failure to follow instructions, the predictable outcome of someone who didn't respect the recovery process. It was a perfect lie, professional, believable, backed by his credentials and position. And for 5 years, it worked. But the truth didn't die, it just waited. Waited in Claire Morrison's conscience, growing heavier with each passing month. Waited in the hospital's records, buried but not destroyed. Waited in Elias's damaged vocal cords, physical proof that something had gone wrong, even if he couldn't immediately prove what. Waited for the right moment, the right resources, the right alignment of courage and opportunity. Because lies are fast. They spread easily. They travel light. They tell people what they want to hear. But truth is patient. Truth is permanent. Truth has weight and substance, and the slow, inevitable gravity of reality. You can run from it. You can bury it. You can spend years constructing elaborate explanations and alternative narratives. But eventually, it finds you. The old saying was right. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. But the truth always finishes the race. Always. Fourth, karma operates without anesthesia. Dr. Vance's downfall wasn't gentle, wasn't easy, wasn't the kind of slow fade where someone quietly retires with their dignity intact and a comfortable pension. It was brutal, public, humiliating in exact proportion to his arrogance. Every newspaper ran the story, every medical journal covered it, every colleague at every conference knew what he'd done. His name became a cautionary tale, a symbol of everything wrong with ego in medicine. Because when karma comes for you, it doesn't dull the pain. It doesn't offer you the comfortable numbness of denial or the mercy of a quiet exit. It gives you the full experience. Every consequence of every choice you made, every bit of pain you inflicted, returned to you with interest. Dr. Vance chose to value a conference over a patient, chose to lie in his surgical notes, chose to blame the victim instead of admitting his mistake and fixing it. And karma made sure he felt every bit of what he'd inflicted on others. The loss, the public blame, the destroyed career, the knowledge that everyone knows what you did wrong and knows that you tried to cover it up. No anesthesia, no mercy, no shortcuts, just pure, undiluted consequence. The ledger doesn't care about your comfort when it's balancing the books. It just cares about balance. Fifth, success is the loudest noise you can make. Elias could have spent 5 years in lawsuits, fighting, screaming, trying to force the world to hear him through legal briefs and court testimony. He could have become bitter, could have let the injustice consume him, could have made revenge his full-time occupation. Instead, he built something, built a company worth hundreds of millions, built a new identity as an entrepreneur and innovator, built the kind of success that speaks louder than any legal brief ever could. When he finally walked into that boardroom, he wasn't a victim seeking justice. He was the owner, the boss, the person who now controlled Dr. Vance's entire professional world. That's not revenge. That's power. That's the kind of triumph that makes your enemies irrelevant instead of just defeated. Think about it. Elias didn't just win a lawsuit. He didn't just get Dr. Vance fired. He bought the entire hospital. He created a technology company that helps millions of people. He turned his damaged voice into a global brand. And only after achieving all of that, only after becoming undeniably successful, did he address the wrong done to him, from a position of absolute strength. The best response to someone who tries to destroy you isn't to destroy them back. It's to build something so successful that they become irrelevant. Success is the noise that drowns out all the doubters, all the liars, all the people who thought you'd disappear quietly. Elias Grant lost his singing voice, but he found a roar that shook an entire industry, built a company that changed lives, created technology that gave voice to the voiceless. And that's louder than any opera ever could be. Louder than any insult or lie could ever silence. Success doesn't just vindicate you, it makes all the noise that tried to drown you out sound like whispers in comparison. Dr. Vance wanted to play God. He forgot that even gods answer to the ledger. Until next time, watch your credits. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been blamed for someone else's mistake? Tell me about it in the comments below. And if this story of justice, karma, and the loudest comeback you've ever heard resonated with you, if you believe that the ledger always balances, that truth is patient, that success speaks louder than revenge, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because every week, I bring you another story of karma at work, another entry in the ledger, another debt collected, another truth that refused to stay buried. The ledger never forgets, and neither should you. Until next time,